going to go into more of the how and the why of training, so that your practice has a kind of roadmap, a kind of orientation. But you must be careful that you're not chasing the priestly or the academic concerns. So, as you remember, I was an academic, and I realized that at first it's very interesting and it's very helpful, but it is its own kind of culture, and it has its own kind of capital, and then your own kind of investment, and eventually it has its own kind of motivation, and it takes you away from the experience. And so I gave you a kind of very simplified cultural theory to explain what I lived through, so that you can be on guard against it. Okay, so in my field was the history of religions, and what I tended to see was that you always had this experience, this realization, a very individual-like or individualistic, subjective experience that happened, or realization. And eventually that tradition, it becomes a tradition as it becomes social. So that person will now meet someone else, they want to have this same realization, and it starts to become social. And as that happens, you start to see a displacement of the experience for the method. Okay? And you start to, when you have that displacement of the method over the experience, and you combine that, and the only reason you would have that is because you have people who don't have the experience. Do you see? And those people organize themselves now according to the method. This is how you get dogma, religious institutions, a priestly class or caste, something like that. And eventually you have empty rituals or dead dogmas, and that happens throughout history. We're not the first era where that's observable, okay? So I have the experience or the experiencer, and then just to simplify things, I give you this priestly moment or priest moment. And so here's where you have that subjective realization, and then here's where you have method over experience. And out of this, because it starts its own kind of capital system made up of actual material capital, but also in terms of symbolic and cultural capital, and everyone's now playing that game. Okay, so I want priestly rank, I want priestly certification, I want institutional power, etc., etc. There comes a moment where you have specialists in the method, okay? And that starts to produce what I call a meta-discourse. It's like, I'm not even having the method over the experience. I'm now just talking about method, okay? I might not even do the method. I have no experience at all in the method. I don't even go to church, okay? I don't do the ritual, but I now can talk about it, okay? And in talking about it, I'm wishing to cash in on that cultural capital, symbolic capital, because I'm an expert in it. And so this I call an academic phase, Okay, and this is marked by the production of this meta-discourse. So this is the discourse, now I'm talking about the discourse. And that's a meta-discourse. So you see that all the time. This is a cultural phenomena that happens. And it also happens, and this is why it's important for us, it happens at the individual level. You lose track of what you're after. And you start to just become ritualists or dogmatists. In many ways, the experience will always resist the dogma. Always. Which is why a tradition like Zen will say it's beyond words. And throughout Zen's history, you'll have this fetishization of language and then a subversion of language. It's like they went too far. So you have your koans, which is a subversion of dogma, a subversion of the sutras. We're going to operate outside of the sutras. But then everyone started memorizing the answers to the koans. They started to be recorded, and you had people now just repeating them. And then you would have characters like Ikkyu who would talk about like this is stupid, okay? And he would subvert that. And his act of spending half his life in the temple and the second half of his life in love with someone and in living in a whorehouse is him getting past the method and back to the experience, okay? You have to struggle with this individually, and the reason for that is there's a psychological reason, okay? These two aspects are fed by the ego tripartite that we talked about before. And so they will speak to us more succinctly, more easily. We will understand them much, much more. They will operate, as we said last time, through things like fear, pride, and ignorance. And they will also, of course, function through our will to power. And this will be manifested over and over and over again. So when you have a character like Ikkyu, and you look at his act of being very, very critical of the Zen of his times to the point where he just turns it on its head. He falls in love with the woman and he goes and lives in a whorehouse, which is the exact opposite of the Pure Land that the temple geography was supposed to represent. But not if you are awakened. You see, to see the temple as a purified space, or even as a space required for training, is a dualism. And so he's turning that on his head. He's operating outside of the dualism. And as simultaneously then, he withdraws from the power system. His rank goes away, do you see? His title goes away. He's probably socially outcasted. Oh, he gave up his vows. Oh, he's an idiot. And then it wasn't until centuries later, through his poetry, that he remained, he actually was the one that saw the light, and everyone else was playing this game over here. Why are they playing this game? Because this speaks to us. This speaks to us in the same way that when Uke comes in with aggressive or offensive energy, we resist it. We push back on it. And so that is why yang clashes are more prevalent, because it speaks to us. It speaks to us through our fear, our pride, and our ignorance. Or why external levers are more prevalent in Aikido, because it speaks to us. Or even why Kokyu might appear easier to gain as a skill rather than Aiki, because it speaks to us. It's operating through a will of power, us overcoming whatever it is that's in our way. Why? Because I have this thing in place, and that's what it does, man. Right? This is something else. So even at an individual level, you should be on guard for when you're showing obvious signs of this working. So you're talking about what people talk about in Aikido. You should shut up. Okay? You talk more like this. You talk more about the method than you're actually training. You should shut up. You should get back to this. You should learn how to subvert all of this. Whatever method you give, whatever discourse or meta-discourse you're using, you should know how to ultimately have it make no sense at all. Then you're operating here. Okay? So we have to keep this in mind, both socially, because maybe I'm in this system over here. This is the only Aikido I know. This is what I recognize as Aikido. I don't recognize the experience anymore. But I also have to be on guard against it, because it happens at an individual level, because this tripartite will be more at home in these functionings. I'm going to talk about the art. I'm going to think about the art. I don't have the experience, the original experience. What experience is that? The actual dismantling of this tripartite. I don't train for it. I don't have it. I don't look for it. I've become satisfied with these things. I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about the how and why for orientation reasons of your training, because we don't want to go, oh, how and why? Dogma and meta-discourse. Okay? We don't want to do that. Okay? All right. I think as a historian, the main problem to knowing the how and why of Budo and Aikido is the epistemic rift that has occurred between what we'll call pre-modern and modern thinking. Okay? And I've mentioned it before. So the pre-modern episteme is what I call concentric in nature. Okay? And the best analogy that I can give you is kind of like Russian stacking dolls. The doll is inside the doll is inside the doll, and it is the same doll, but it's also not the same doll. Okay? This thinking might appear to us to be very illogical, but in fact, it is logic or reason followed out to its extreme. And the place that you see this most prevalent is in an Indian philosopher called Nagarjuna. Okay? And he came up with, he's trying to look at reason in Buddhist philosophy, and he came up with this, what can we say about reality? And it's known as his Tetralemma. Okay, so I'm going to represent it. So A is A. This is that. You can say that. Or this is this. We're going to represent that as A is A. That is one thing you can look at the world and you go, oh, that is a map. A map is a map. A is A. Okay? But you're going to see eventually that A is not A, or A equals B. So this is a map, right? But you find out that it's often much, much more than that to somebody. So for example, people freak out when you have your shoes on the mat. Do you see? It's more than a mat then, isn't it? Apparently it's more than a mat, okay? And then once I allow for those two propositions, so here we go. A mat is a mat. A mat is not outside. Do you see that? That's a mat is more than a mat, okay? And then once I allow for those two propositions, then by reasonable extension, you're going to have a not to it, okay? So you're going to have A is not B. So I had A is A, and then I have here A is not A. A is not A, probably better, right? And because I allow for that, I can have A does not equal not A. Of course. You see, this is how you do it. And then what you're going to find is, well, it is, once I allow that, I have the fourth logical extension. And then the thing is both. So A equals not A and A and A. Okay, so I'll write this out in English. This thing is not, is both, and is neither. Is it, okay, this is the logic. So you take those Russian dolls, and of course, it's the same doll pattern, but it's not the same doll. So because of that, it is both the same doll and not the same doll, right? And because of that, it is neither nor. You go by extension, okay? And so the way, why is this concentric is like the Russian dolls, is how you understand it. Okay, what is the scientific episteme? The scientific episteme is only the first two. Something is or is not. And that's all you get. Okay? Why? Whoa, what about that? No. Don't even go there. Okay? But as you'll see, even in various realms of science where they're pushing the thinking, just like Nagarjuna did hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you start to get this thing all the time. So it is both a wave and a particle. It is neither a particle nor a wave, do you see? Because it is just reason pushed to its extreme. Okay? But most of the times when you're operating as a modern, you're operating at what I would call a pop level of the scientific episteme, and you're functioning here. Now, why is that important to know? Because this leads to misunderstandings in my Aikido. It's not a technology invented through the modern episteme. It's a technology invented through the pre-modern episteme. So it's not going to just function at here. Why is that important? Okay, because this leads to analogy and metaphor. And that is how most of you understand your Aikido, is through analogy and metaphor. But the pre-moderns don't do that. They're looking for this thing. And once I have all four reason conclusions, I actually don't have only analogy and metaphor, but I have what is very important. I have communion. Those four things are happening simultaneously, like the Russian stacking dolls. They are a unified system, okay? We don't want to understand our art like this because this is part of this. We want to understand our art like this because this is part of this. And I'll give you an example of that now. Okay, so let's say he's going to do ski. And here comes a contesting energy. Okay? He's A and I'm B. So he comes in, boom! And then we know in Aikido through our dogma and our meta-discourse that I should become harmonious with that thing. Okay? But because I don't understand things concentrically, it's more of an analogy or a metaphor for harmony. Okay? It's not a communion. So for example, as he goes, and I'll do that. You see? And now, metaphorically, I am in harmony with him because we're no longer opposing each other. I'm now looking over there. He's looking over there. We don't have competing, contesting views. Okay? So here it comes, and I don't contest, and I move out of the way. But I am contesting. You are. You still have B and A. And this pre-modern idea is going to be different. I'm actually going to have an A-B unification, or the neither nor. Okay? That's how communion is going to be manifested. So throughout the religious discourses of the world, you have systems that will recognize it positively. It's both A and B. And you have systems that will recognize it negatively. It's neither A nor B. But what happens is the first two options go away. Okay? So as he comes in, and I go here, and I generate my adhesion. So I'm not grabbing him because that would be A and B. So as we're here, he can't go backwards, sure. He can't go backwards because it just pulls him off balance. And he can't go forward. And the reason he can't is because I'm not going backward or forward. You see? And so we, in the internal Aikido adhesion, have become one. So I'm going to show you the difference. They kind of look the same. So we go, and I'm going to do an external. You see? But if you pay attention, they don't sound the same, and they don't really look the same. So I'm going to do the same thing with the Aikido adhesion. And you can test for it now. So if I do an external thing, he should be able to either push through or pull apart because we are both either A or B. Do you get it? So he can run through if he wants, or he can pull apart any point in the technique that you want. Okay? The way that most Aikido people get rid of that is they assign him an external, additional task. So when you felt my yang-yang clash, which is him pulling against my grip, you were supposed to stop and turn back around. Do you get it? Can you do that again? Okay, so he goes. You see? And you can see the consciousness in his turn. If you pay attention, you can see that. He turned himself. Why? Because he was supposed to. Okay. When I have the adhesions on him, he can't turn apart. He can't go wherever he wants. So as I already showed, he can't go forward. He can't go forward. He can't. And he can't go back. Okay? And the more he tries, because of things we're going to go into, the more the adhesion shows up. So it's nature working itself. The more he tries to pull the two forces apart, the more the two forces hold themselves together. It's the way the universe works, okay? So, in fact, if he was very, very relaxed and loose and was not at all manifesting A, he's like a ghost. It's much harder to get A to be both B or neither B, okay? Because he's not a strong A. He's not an A with a lot of integrity. But the more that he pushes, the more he's subject to what I do to his balance. You see? You get that? So, it's not an analogy of not contesting. It's actually a concentric unification of A and B. Or if you want to posit it negatively, A and B disappear. So it's neither, at that moment, he's not A and I'm not B. Or both at A and B equal the same thing, is how you understand. Okay? So we go, and let's have it where he is going to play with what I'm doing. Okay, but I will never grab. Okay, to grab is to manifest B, and then I'm back in the number 2. A does not equal B. Okay, so there's no need to grab. He's gonna do whatever. So he's gonna move whatever. So he could even throw the other strike if he wants. It doesn't change the relationship. Okay, I might have to move. Like for example, he throws that strike. I don't want to go like that. Okay, so he goes, and I'm just gonna do the technique. And I'm not trying to do Kotagaeshi as a self-defense against that stupid punch. I'm just generating the first aspect of the Tetralemma, the first 2 aspects. A does not equal B. Okay? So he goes in, I get the communion, and he does whatever he wants to do, and I'll do my technique. Okay? You might experience that everything falls apart because I can't get to the 3rd and 4th aspects of the Tetralemma. But that's getting us further along than when we were operating with just analogy or metaphor. Okay? So we're going to be on guard for this happening within us. And of course we have to be self-reflexive that it's actually happening culturally, socially. So most of Aikido is at this level right now, overwhelming, because most of my Aikido will have a tendency to operate at that level. Okay? There's not some sinister mustache twirling person that's ruining Aikido. It's just, this speaks to my ego tripartite, and so most of us will do this. Okay? And so at an individual level, you must be on guard. So I'm going to give you some information, that how and why, and be careful. Okay, so in what is today China, going back to at least recorded history, so you're looking at least 500 BCE, there was a notion of how the universe, all creation, all life, everything, so therefore including me, and therefore including the Nage-Uke relationship, and therefore the techniques of the art. Everything is of this same concentric nature. The universe just keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. Okay? And so this is how you get certain understandings. One of them is heaven, man, earth, and that's what we want to go in today, okay? Because our understanding of this concept cannot be one of analogy or metaphor. It has to include this thing. It has to be concentric, and I'll explain that as we go along. So we've already talked before how from another discourse, and which never contradicted this discourse, they're all just trying to say the same thing. We have that kind of numerology. Here we have a kind of sacred geometry. But it's all discussing the same thing. It's people in this class trying to understand and explain to people who haven't had the experience yet how you have the experience. Okay? So before we've talked about the Tao, and so there's this one thing that is beyond all knowability because it is beyond all duality. So it's void, it's chaos, it's that, okay? And from the Tao comes the 2 things. So I have this kind of universal oneness, or again, sometimes expressed in a negative way, void, this kind of zeroness or this kind of emptiness. And from that, the 2 things come, and that's my yin and yang. And then my yin and yang, and so we'll break off into 4 and 4 into 8, and it just goes on. And then numbers are given value, and that's how you get these numerologies. And again, you are going to get specialists on the discourse And you start to, in my opinion, this is what I mean when you made a fetish out of the thing. You're more concerned, number 2. I don't give a fuck about number 2. Because in the end, I have this one. Do you see? Which is how the experiencer would do it. It's the same thing like, EQ, you're hanging out in the whorehouse, you're going to be impure. I don't give a fuck about purity and pollution. Do you see? He's gotten to the heart of the matter. He's beyond purity and pollution. It doesn't matter where he's at now. The whorehouse is the pure land. So, this idea here, these are a using of this reason to explain how the universe works. So, the universe is going to function, and that there's an underlying totality to it of some kind, and it has to manifest itself by dividing into 2, and then these 2 things keep going and going. And so the world, everything is split up in yin and yang. So right now, when you have your last technique of the ski, they have yang energy, do you see? And when I got out of the way externally, I did yin energy, okay? But that is not a communion. That's still yin and yang existing. So I'm still operating at this level, as I said, which is this level. Okay? They're yang, I get out of the way, I stay yin. Okay? And a lot of people think that's the eye of Aiki, but that's not. Okay? The eye of Aiki is happening here. So at a moment when we make contact, the yin and yang division goes away, and we become one, and we return to the natural workings of the universe, this pre-division thing. So we can't disconnect. He can't pull apart, he can't push in, and we just get stuck. Communion happens, okay? Why does it work? Because this is the nature of the universe. I'm not doing anything. This is just what the universe does. And your ancient technology of these martial arts are based upon that. Whenever the yin-yang is manifested again, as it was originally, so he punching, me being punched, I am just continuing to function that aspect of the universe. The yin-yang aspect is a natural aspect of the universe. But so is this voidness, this singularity. What we're trying to do is operate at that voidness, that singularity, the loss of the individual self. Remember, this experience is a reconciliation of the subject-object dichotomy. It's a kind of ecstasy. I'm kind of outside myself, meaning I do feel me, but I do feel him, and he feels like me. Like when I like, what are you feeling, Dave? That's what I'm kind of feeling. I don't really feel this yin-yang thing. It's not him against me, or me against him, or me getting out of the way of him. Do you get it? So, what makes this manifest itself? Ego manifested. That tripartite shows up. So my fear or my desire, my preferencing, manifests the duality and the ego identity. All that thing starts to function. So as I try to throw them, the I shows up and the separation happens. And so your art gets reduced to external things. Like you're just using fulcrum and lever. I try to be powerful. I try not to get hit. I try to get out of the way. All of those things are manifesting the same yin-yang, which is not this level of the art, which is this level of the art. Why does that speak to us? Because of those ego reasons, but also because of this is our modern episteme. This makes sense to us. This does not make sense to us. It's counterintuitive. The same way that the theoretical physicist will preface his or her discourse with, this is a little hard to grasp, because he or she is going to be operating at this. It's not intuitive to us, but you know what? It was never intuitive to humanity. It was always a specialized understanding, which is why you had people like Kung Su, Lao Tzu, Nagarjuna, EQ. They're operating outside of the norm. They're operating outside of that ego tripartite. Okay? So let me, before we go here, let me give you an example of how I can do what we would understand as the non-contestation, you see, but one operating at the level of the void versus one operating externally at the level of the yin, a yin-yang kind of thing, okay? So we're going to do, so when I understand the world and the technique dualistically, and I don't understand this underlying universal principle where the void is, or the Tao, or the communion, or the union, or the negative, or the emptiness, that thing, I don't understand that. I'm not understanding the ancient discourse, which is, if you got rid of all yin-yang, you would get rid of all contestation, you see. And so, therefore, once I'm operating at the level of the Tao, I don't have to reduce my technique to external yin-yang displacements. Okay, so for example, he's coming in, and this is always going to be a matter of me creating an external yin space when I'm operating at an ego tripartite level. So he comes in, and I've moved out of the way. I've moved out of the way. And so he goes again, and this would be the opposite. I moved into the way. So people are going like, no, okay, this is Aikido. Move out of the way, always yielding. He's always trying to get me, and I'm always going to yield. Or people are like, well, no, just overpower that thing. It's yin-yang still. You're still at that level. The universe is still functioning at its division. But because I don't have yin or yang, you can move out of the way, as we just demonstrated, or you can still close the gap. And it will not be the same yang. It will not be the same yang as that. So he goes, boom. I don't have to go here and yield. I can go inside, okay? And the same thing, push, pull. And I don't have to do the yield either. I don't have to go this way. You can't go the other way, because everything is happening in that void. I can go any way. I can push, I can pull, I can go up, I can go down. Okay? So, this one I'm not going to do an external deviation. Whoa, hit hard, hit hard, hit harder. Same thing. So, I don't have to get out of the way. Go. I'm not the same target, but he goes, and same thing. No, stay there. Well, what became the target? Go. Boom, harder. It's now just my sticking point. So we go. Hard, harder, hardest. This would be, go, are you going to do it again? Yeah. That would be a yang manifestation. And you can see he's going to displace me because he has more mass than he has the inertia. Okay? So he goes, I'm like, that's not what I'm doing. his energy, I disappear, and his energy is going into me. Artist? And you do, and I'm showing that because I can do what would appear to be the opposite of a yin tactic. I'm letting him hit me, but he's not hitting me as if I was yang, as if I was contesting it. Because my body has been organized outside of the yin-yang division. Okay, so hence I can do small deflections. And I'm not, he's pushing, I'm not contesting him. The same energy is going around me, even though I'm not getting out of the way. So my Aikido does not have to be reduced to defense or constantly retreating and creating or maintaining distance. That's a yin-yang world. What I want to do is function at the level of the Tao, beyond the two divisions, beyond the top two aspects of the Tetralemma. And my technique can go backwards or forward or even stay still. You see? And so now the whorehouse is the Pure Land. So we'll do these two techniques. I'm going this way, or I'm going that way. Okay? So I can do both the apparent forward and the apparent backward. Okay, so we explained how different traditions through their priestly class or their priestly cycle of cultural evolution come up with discourses, and we've mentioned there's a numerological one, and we mentioned this kind of cosmological one, and we're going to mention another cosmological one to help us understand. Okay, and we want to keep in mind those Russian dolls, that concentric nature to all this. Okay, and then why? Because that's just the nature of the universe. So as I manifest my or as my ego dualism preference construct shows up, as this shows up, it shows up because it's a natural part of the universe, and I start to experience the world in yin and yang ways. But human beings have this special capacity. This is how the discourse talks about it. There's something unique to human beings, is you can function with the universe in that sense, or you, unlike other things in the universe, you can function at this level too. So you can do your art through some sort of yin-yang thing. Either my art is a yang overpowering a yang, or my art is I'm constantly displacing and creating distance. I'm a yin, always in response to the yang. Or you can do it at this level where it's not, I'm neither and I'm both. Okay? I'm here at this oneness, voidness level. So it does look like I'm a target in the sense that he hit me, but I'm not functioning like a target does. Do you see? I do go back, but I'm not going back in the sense that I'm getting out of his way. Do you see? Or I do go forward, but I'm not going forward in the sense that I'm overpowering him. Okay? And so my art is not meant to be understood this way. And so by doing my art in that sense, I am doing the ascetic practice, which is what this is, the ascetic practice of dismantling the subject-object dichotomy, dismantling the ego tripartite, and the universe functions through me now. I become one with the Tao. Okay, that great void. That's what's happening. All right, so now we're going to use this kind of sacred geometry or / sacred cosmology to understand. Okay, so there was some void, there's some emptiness, some preformed thing. Okay, and it's always there's some great potential. It is often called the Tao sometimes, but it's not. And then the split happened. Okay, And that split happened, and it created above and below. So it created this world and the other world. So it created the top part, and that is heaven, and then the bottom part is earth. Okay, why the bottom part? Again, why is kind of a weird question, because these are more just maps of meaning. They're not really like we would want to understand it in terms of instructional manuals. Where you got your instructions was with the person that had the experience. Okay, you didn't just read a book. You had to go under a master, which is a person that was able to dismantle this construct, reconcile the subject-object dichotomy, and they would help you do that. Okay, but so be careful, because if you start seeing this as an instructional manual, then you're going to start doing this kind of thing. Okay, so the universe had to have heavy and light, so part of it came down and part of it stayed up. And the part that stayed up we're going to call heaven, and the part that came down we're going to call earth. Okay, but you can understand it. It's just a split of that void. Okay, and then so here's my heaven, and then here's my earth. And then in the middle, man, as I said, has that precarious or weird or just strange or special position that you are actually functioning in between the two. Okay. Again, you can look at Buddhist mythology, and if you look at its reincarnation models, it was only human beings who could become Buddha. You could be reborn as a deity. And you might think that's better, but it's not better, because the deity is still subject to the yin-yang rule. It's better to be a human and reach Buddhahood, because then you're one with the Tao, or one with the divine, or what have you. See? So many cultures afford this special status to human beings. As a modern, what I would say is that your nature is of such a degree that you have 1 foot in the natural world and 1 foot under your conscious control. And the best way of looking at this is your breath, which is why breath throughout history has played such a prominent role in religious practices. So your breath, if you go to sleep, you're not conscious, your body still breathes, but you can consciously control your breath. And also consciously, you can see that you actually interrupt your natural breathing cycle. So through, let's say, a panic attack, there's nothing functionally and mechanically wrong with your lungs, but you're suffocating, right? Or I ask you to concentrate on your breath, and now you can't have the same breathing pattern. This one went in at a level 5 value, came out at level 6 value, went in at 2 value this time. I got a 10 value coming out, It's constantly changing. So you have some weird status to your organism that pre-modern man didn't see other places. It's not necessarily ethnocentric or, go humans kick ass. It was an observation in nature. So animals and trees and things like that would just follow this natural cycle that nature had for them. They were almost innately one with the Tao. But human beings had this capacity to, so to speak, fall from grace, and you could be fucking it up, and you're really subject to hanging out there and experiencing the world basically as context. Okay, so man had this central position, and again, I talked about a sacred geometry. You have these shapes, and just like once a priestly class comes in and a meta discourse gets developed, the values start to change. So depending on where you look on history, for example, yin is associated with certain things, and you look another place, time in history, after these two evolutions have happened, and that thing is now associated with yang. You get all these lists. So same thing happens here. Squares associated with heaven in one, but man is now associated with triangle, and in another one, man's associated with circle. We don't give a fuck, because we're not going to do that game. Okay, we're trying to understand something instead. So you get, just for coolness sake, right? If that's heaven, and early, what is now China, religious traditions, heaven had some sense of also being that Tao, that divine, that universal God. And so at a certain point in history, there was no personal universal God, but early on in history, Tian was a God, like in the, like even in the sense of, what is that tradition, so above, so below? It's eluding my name now, this modern tradition. It's eluding my mind. I can't remember. They have this sense that there's this overreaching universal divine principle. Tin had that understanding as well. But even if you go into some certain smaller villages, it wasn't only that grand scheme of things, but, well, no, it's like a god. There's a little statue. That's Tian. It's a little statue, and I worship the little statue. So you get all these variations, okay? And it would go on and on forever. The high heavenly plane would go on and on ad infinitum. And so you just kind of represented it with that square, and it preceded Earth. And what happened is if I divide the square into yin and yang sides, what do I get? 2 triangles. So that's represented on the Earth as you're going here. And then the circle, as we say, you're part of this weird thing of both of heaven or the void or the Tao, but not. You start to have like, well, a circle is really when you take off the corners, and you're going to have this shape like that. And sometimes the entire system is represented, you know, and they'll put it all together, because what is this? It's just the nature of the universe. It's just how it works, okay? All right. I got that I can understand it geometrically. I got that this is the nature of the universe. I got that I have some special capacity to either function at a yin-yang level or to function at a Tao level. I get it, but how am I actually doing that? Okay, well, it's, again, don't get stuck, but heaven is always pushing down. If I stand in the middle, what's it pushing down on? It's pushing down on me, do you see? And it pushes down into the earth, okay? So heaven is invisible. The earth is visible. So this model right here is representing your internal arts. So the invisible pressure, force, whatever. I have 2 options that I can do. I can yin-yang it, you see, so I can contest it, or I can get out of the way of it. Or I can kind of be permeable. So that energy comes down and goes into the earth, do you see? And this is the natural cycle of the universe. Heaven is pressing on earth, and earth is holding up heaven. Force is going to come through. I don't want to get in the way of it, because if I get in the way of it, the ego tripartite manifests, and I enter into a contestation with my partner. So I either have to get out of the way, or I have to overpower it. Instead, what I want to do is I want that energy, their force of their punch, to pass through me. So when I demonstrated me flexing and bracing, you saw the normal physics that you're understanding. His punch displaced me, and I went backwards. But when you saw me become permeable, his force went down into the ground, and heaven is pushing back on earth. And so his force, invisible heavenly force, goes through me and comes back out, and you saw him bounce off of me. Okay? This idea, tying this more into Aikido, is in this practice. Chinkon Kishin. Okay. So today in Aikido, because we're operating at this level and very few people have this experience anymore, this has come to mean something entirely different. This is some sort of ritual you do with certain exercises. And then somehow, strangely, as this Tetralemma and this concentric episteme is thought to be pseudoscientific or non-scientific and hence mystical, and by that we mean magic-based and just goofy, false. People practice Chinkon Kishin with basically magic as its underlying epistemology. So I'm going to do these exercises, and then in those exercises somehow magically I become more centered or my techniques become better. So maybe I do it before class, and hopefully that'll I'll be able to stick to the person or create a communion or manifest out. You get it? But you go, why? I mean, no one knows fucking why. It just is, because it's magic. You just do it, and then magically it happens. So strangely, us moderns are actually operating at the very level of thinking that we're more critical of. Again, this was an extreme extension of reason, not a denunciation of reason. Okay? So what are these practices in reality? So Chinkon, I'm going to use my terms to understand it, to help you get here. Okay? I'm not interested in these. You tell them fuck off. Okay? Chinkon is really organization. Organization of your entire being, so that includes your mind, your body, your thoughts, everything, your intention, your desire, everything, all gets organized. And then, so when I do that, what is this organization? It's the organization that allows the energy to pass through me and go on to the other energy. So using this sacred geometry, it allows the heavenly plane to push down on the earth and the earthly plane to push back on heaven. I become permeable, you see? And when I become permeable and those two things are happening, that's when this happens. Okay? So originally, these are Japanese words for this practice. Originally, they were done separately. But today in Aikido, it's one kind of phrase. So I would do these body organization practices, and by doing those body organization practices, I became permeable, and then this happened. What did this happen? What does that mean? That this is when the kami or the divine or this invisible outside things is going to operate the way it naturally does. It pushes through until it hits something else that it can't push through. And so this is where O-sensei would talk about kami possession, or being possessed by the divine, or becoming one with God. But this becoming one with God is the very practice that you're doing in your Aikido training all the time. I am constantly organizing my body in such a way that that energy is able to pass through me. You see? And then I do one of two things with it. What do you do, Dave? You do the very two aspects of the universe itself. The very two aspects of the universe itself. One is I separate things, or I bring things together. That's what the universe wants to do constantly. It wants to, okay, these two things get apart. Oh, these two things together. Oh, those four things together. Those 8 things apart, right? And those two forces, once the energy comes into me, we call kokyu and we call aiki. Well, kokyu is the separating energy. This is why I refer to it as projection. I'm separating the communion between uke and nage, between myself and the person punching me. That's when I throw them. Or I use that internal passing through me of the energy and to maintain a adhesion. Okay, and that's why Aiki is an adhesion. I'm bringing two things into this togetherness. Okay, and just like Kishin is kind of passive, meaning I don't do it, it just happens. I do the organization, and then the universe does what it does. The same thing. Kokyu and Aiki are more passive. Even if I want to assign one yang and one yin, they're more passive things that happen following the organization of my body. Meaning, I will organize myself for his energy to pass through me, and then he hits a Kokyu hard spot, and then he gets projected. The universe does what it does. Or he hits, that energy passes through me, I don't do anything more, and the adhesion starts. And that's what you've been seeing is a lot of the adhesion. So when I touch him and he gets stuck to me, I had organized my body in a particular way that now he's stuck to me. When he punched me and he bounced off of me, I organized my body in a particular way, and then he hit the ground and he bounced off of me. The universe separates itself. So let's give demonstrations. So when I'm doing my art in that sense of Chinkon Kishin, I'm constantly trying to get that organization, and then I allow those two different energies to manifest. I just become concentric with the very workings of the universe. I am the universe. I'm not fighting him. The universe is just doing its thing, okay? So he'll just come in, right? And I'm doing that thing. So I'm going to, again, it's not difficult to see or hear because there's other energies at play than the external ones. And it's just like if I was playing a guitar or a wind instrument, if I touch the outside of it, I put another energy in, I'm going to change the sound of it. And so, same thing happens here. If you pay attention, there's more baritone, things like, why would he flip over? He doesn't have a choice. He's going forward and around me. He is not turning on me. So do that same one, turning. And he turns the other way. And you see, he's not doing that. So we're now going to go in just a Jiu-jitsu. And the reason for this is to do Chinkon Kishin, you're doing it all the time in Kihon Waza, but you ultimately want to do it spontaneously like the universe functions, okay? Not through form alone. So you can just do whatever. I'm just doing different things of that. And it's key that your uke doesn't ever stop. Letting his energy pass. And it can be with external movements. It can be with EV movements. And of course, it can be with no movement. But the more that you do things and the less passive it is, probably the less you're doing it. Meaning, if I go and I push and pull and turn his arms, I'm probably not doing it. Do you see? Okay? So, playing with this again, organize. is just aesthetic. Constantly doing that.